public health. And I got the fortune of having Dawn assigned to me, and I can tell you that I learned a tremendous amount from her back then. I had an interest in HIV at that time. She was already deeply embedded in HIV research at that time. But more than anything, what I can say about Dawn is that she challenged me to be better. She challenged me to always do my best, to never not settle. I remember delivering papers to her that there'd be some red ink that would come back, and I but I learned I learned how to tell the story I needed to tell, how to ask the research questions in the way that they needed to be asked in order to get to the answer that you're trying to get to. And so, my tribute to you, Dawn, is to say that again, you've contributed to my career in making me better from the very early days. And so I thank you for that. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking because I want us to be able to have a dialogue, but I want to say a few things. I want to say how exciting it is where we are now, because I think we can finally say that we have made some significant progress towards HIV prevention options for women. And that is, that's a big deal, because it did feel like for a long time we were a little stuck in the mud. We just weren't getting our traction. We weren't able to make progress in the way we'd hoped to for women. And I'm super proud of the efforts that we've been able to make as a part of ViiV Healthcare, which I work at in partnership with the HIV Prevention Trials Network around long-acting cabotegravir for prevention, where we've really shown remarkable efficacy, essentially 90% higher than the standard of care. That's so important because really this was one of the first studies to really demonstrate superior efficacy in women. And that is what we've been striving for. And I believe it is the beginning, because clearly there are many other efforts that are going on now to look at multiple different types of interventions. And so, the intervention that I'm talking about here is an injectable, where people will dose with an injection every 2 months. There are folks that are looking at all many other modalities, implants, oral medicines, patches, all sorts of interventions, so that we get to a point where there are many choices that are available to women to protect themselves against HIV. I remember some years ago at an international AIDS conference, I was struck by a presentation from a brilliant colleague, Geeta Ramji, who many of you may have known of her as a really wonderful HIV researcher out of South Africa. And Geeta was giving a presentation on the future and the ambition of PrEP, and she gave this one slide that this talked about, sort of this thing about ABC. You remember we used to talk about the ABCs: abstinence, be faithful, and condoms as our prevention efforts. And she essentially was striking through that and said we needed to have an entire alphabet of options for women. And that included injections and orals and implants and diaphragms that prevent HIV, and on and on and on. And that struck me. Sadly, we lost Geeta this past year to the COVID epidemic. But I know she would be extremely proud of the progress that we've been making and been able to share over the past year in really moving the needle and challenging the field, that there has to be that array of options for women, and that the clinical trials have to be designed in a way that includes all women, and then that actually answer the questions that are relevant for women, that answer the questions that are relevant around pregnancy, that answer the questions around combinations of medicines, drug interactions, long-term tolerability, all of the questions that people want to hear. And so I feel very proud of the progress that we've made, because, again, we were really kind of stuck. We have still a long, long way to go. But the best news I can say is that we have filed cabotegravir for PrEP. That file is under review with the FDA. If we are successful, that will mean that we'll launch this product at the beginning of next year. And so we will, in our hands, have a new, I think, very exciting tool for PrEP. And so I'm more than happy to answer any questions that people have about that or any of the other efforts that we're making. But I just wanted to mostly get out there, you know, we're making progress. We have a lot more to do. And I want to turn it over to Dawn, because she has really been, she's really been at the forefront of pushing the envelope and making sure that we answered these questions for women. She has led HIV prevention efforts for decades. She never left women behind. There was always more information on men. She always challenged to make sure that that work was happening for women. And so, Dawn, I'll turn it over to you for your thoughts.
Thanks, Kim. You know, I grew up in a small farming community in Southwest Michigan and never thought I would be a physician. I had never seen a Black woman physician. I had never heard of a Black woman physician. It just wasn't in my head. And I didn't even meet a Black physician, women physician, till I was in medical school. So when you ran across me and I was told that I needed to mentor you, it was very exciting for me to have other Black women who were going to be partners in this work, and being able to help you in whatever way I could was really to my benefit. It was not just for you, but it was because I knew it wasn't good to be alone in this area, that we needed a cadre of people who were going to be doing this work. And now, years along, you know, particularly with respect to women in PrEP, you know, there are dozens of Black and African and white and Indian and all kinds of women who are dedicating a large part of their professional career to this work. And so it's no longer the case that there's one or two people that you talk to about women in PrEP. There's a whole array of people. And when you and I retire, there's a whole generation of people who are coming along behind us, who are committed to making this work and developing the new options. And so it's a very exciting time, but I think it's also this kind of an opportunity to engage Black women from various backgrounds and perspectives is very rare and very much appreciated, because at the end of the day, when we go home, we're not doctors. We're just women in the community. We have sisters and friends and children and parents and church and school and, you know, all the same stuff that everybody else has to deal with in life. And I think this kind of an opportunity to kind of hear from our sisters about what they're thinking and what they want and what their questions are is really valuable. So I'm going to shut up now, and whatever questions people have, we're really excited about this conversation. Miss Leisha, take it away.
Yes, ma'am. So the floor is open. I'm gonna take us off a speaker view so I can see if people's hands are raised. Any questions that you might have for Dr. Kim Smith or Dr. Dawn Smith. This is just such an amazing opportunity to ask those questions now. And because we are such an intimate group, you can choose either to put your question in the chat feature or come off of mute and ask any questions that you might have. And I'm gonna start with Dr. Kim Smith while some folks are getting over their shyness. So we talked about cabotegravir and that being a game changer potentially early next year. I don't want to make the assumption that all the women who are sharing this space with us know what that is and how that's going to impact women. So could you just share a little bit more about that? And then and even if this gets approved by the FDA and we see this early next year, what might that process even look like to have another option for PrEP for women?
So I'll start, and then I know Dawn's going to have something to add to that. So let me just talk a little bit about cabotegravir. So cabotegravir is it is an integrase inhibitor. So it's in the same family of medicines as dolutegravir and raltegravir, and so it's sort of in a class that we've kind of gotten used to. But this is the first integrase inhibitor that is long acting. And so that means it just hangs around for a long time. And so what we've been able to do is take advantage of that and make it into an injectable medicine where you get a shot. So an intramuscular shot in your buttock, in your gluteal muscle. And it lasts for 2 months. And so you come in every 2 months and you get your shot. And that medicine stays in your system over the course of that 2 months at a level that if you were to become exposed to HIV, it should make it significantly less likely that you become infected. Now, I can't say it's 100% effective, but I can say that it is very effective. The study that showed that to us is called HPTN, or HIV Prevention Trials Network Study 084. It was a study of 3,200 women, mostly in sub-Saharan Africa, mostly South Africa. And they were randomized, half of the population in the trial got oral Truvada, the other half got injectable cabotegravir. And we monitored these women, and they were blinded. And so nobody, the person on the trial did not know which one they were getting. So, they were coming into the clinic and getting a shot every 2 months, and they were taking a pill every day. And so either the shot was a dummy shot or the pill was a dummy pill, so that everybody was on some sort of PrEP, but they didn't know which one they were on. And so we watched these women over many months, and ultimately the study was stopped early because the data that came out showed that there were 40 infections that occurred. And of those 40 infections, only 4 of them were in the women who were on cabotegravir, and the other 36 of them were in women who were on the oral Truvada. And so that was basically a 90% improvement with the injectable drug over the oral drug. And that the statistical terminology says it was superior. And so that was really quite remarkable. When we saw that data, I can tell you the whole team pretty much broke into tears. Dawn and I think did a little happy dance on the phone together, just because we were so happy to see something that could work for women. And so all of that came to fruition almost a year ago is when that data was revealed. And since then, we've worked with, partners in the government, the HIV Prevention Trials Network, and all of the different women who participated in the trial, and all the investigators who participated in the trial, and all the statisticians and tons of people really put their heart and soul into pulling all that data together, because you can imagine that's a really big study, pulling all that data together, turning it into what we call a file to go to the FDA. And that went in July of this year. And we were told just recently that we have what's called priority review, which means a 6-month review period. And so that means that our timing would be that if the FDA approves us, they'll approve us sort of no later than January, and maybe even late this year. And so what that will mean, I think, is that in addition to oral Truvada that's out there as a PrEP agent for people right now, there will be an injectable agent. And that means, you come into your doctor's office and get your shot and have your visit, and then you don't think about it again for the next 2 months. And I think that does have the potential to change the game, in that one of the challenges that has been the case with oral PrEP is that it's just hard for folks to consistently take a medicine every day when they're not necessarily thinking about, their HIV risk every day. Who is, right? Why would you be? And so, something where you don't need to do something every day has I think, a real potential to change the game. I'll stop there and let Dawn add her thoughts.
Right. I think one of the reasons that we were very happy with the 084 trial results, besides the fact that it was another effective agent for women, was that there had been the experience of having a trial of another agent that was only done in men and therefore couldn't be approved for women. And while daily oral PrEP was proven effective with Truvada for women as well as for men, so women already had an option. It was just upsetting as all get out to have the field be studying new interventions for prevention only in men and not in women. It was so intensely disrespectful of the population. And there was a lot of discussion about, well, now that we have an effective agent, it's really hard to study women. And so I think having a woman who was in a position to say to her company, we're not doing it that way. We're going to make sure that that women are represented in this trial, whatever it takes, has really taught the field as a whole that you can't dismiss women in that way, that you have to find a way to meet the needs of women as well as men. And so I think ViiV has been rightly lauded for the way they went about proving cabotegravir's effectiveness for both men and women. And you've really changed the field. I mean, there are no studies now going forward that don't include both men and women. So I would say that. And then the second thing I would say is that, you know, women come in all sizes and flavors and have all kinds of demands on their time. For some women, taking a pill every day is the easiest possible thing to do. It becomes a habit, you just do it, and that's the end of it. But for many women, that's not the case. And so for those women, you're going to be able to offer the opportunity to have an injection every 2 months. Now, there's some women for whom going to the doctor every 2 months it is, you know, that's hard for them. And so, you know, we've been thinking in oral prep about ways to kind of space out the visits and get labs done in a different way, because there really is a need for multiple options that are delivered in multiple ways so that every woman can find her own place in this prevention landscape. Sort of like contraception, where, you know, people use this example all the time, but, you know, where we have had daily oral pills for, I don't know what, 50 years now. But now we also have vaginal rings, and we have implants, and we have injections, and we have all kinds of options, which means that everybody who wants to contracept can find something that works for them.
Yeah. And Dr. Dawn Smith, thank you for sharing that, because there are some of us who might be a birth control pill baby. Moms missed a pill here or there or everywhere, and that just wasn't the best option for them. And when you don't have alternatives, it's either this or nothing. And sometimes trying to make this work doesn't always yield the results that you see in other populations. And so I know that I'm one who's super excited about the possibility of 2022 starting off right and giving women other options for the use of PrEP. I don't know if these questions are only coming to me or not, but I actually have a few questions in the chat. I don't know if you all see questions in the chat. One question is, what will it take for HIV prevention research to consider Black cisgender women in the US who also bear a disproportionate burden of HIV?
Kim, I'll let you take that one.
So I can't see the questions in the chat. I'm not sure what.
Okay, they must be coming directly to me, but no worries. I'm gonna read them.
It's a great question. And so what I will say is the time is now. And so, you know, what we're doing as a follow-on to the 084 study is actually what we call some sort of implementation or sort of demonstration projects that will be done in the US to get the experience of cisgender US women with long-acting prevention in order to get perspective, experience, tolerability, all of the questions that we want to have answered for US women alongside women from other parts of the world, particularly Southern Africa. So yeah, the time is now that should be occurring, and it is occurring.
Danielle, I saw your hand raised.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Ms. Leisha, and thank you to both Dr. Smith for providing a forum to discuss this very critical scientific issue. I can tell you that I have my op-ed ready to rock and roll. At the moment, the news is shared publicly if we get an indication in cisgender women. There has been some conversations happening in the community at the community level about, so what happens next, right? You all have submitted your dossier to the powers that be to get the approval, and then you'll come to community to get some qualitative, or what you guys are calling implementation science related research answered. But it's almost like we're still thinking about US-based Black women after the fact, right? When the results of 083 came out, I was on listservs that flourished with webinars. We even organized one here in LA to talk about what some of those results look like. 084, not as much excitement, and that's a quick nod to Leisha and her Atlanta Black Prep Leaders Group, who provided space to talk about what the results of 084 meant. And we know that prep knowledge and acceptability amongst women, especially Black women, is low in this country. So we've developed this fabulous new option, which, again, I'm hopeful we'll get an indication for approval, but we're still back to this space where now we take the innovation to communities. Now we have to see what you all think. And now we'll still have to overcome some of those limitations that we are being considered after the fact. So, I'd like to hear a little bit more about what you all think about. My original question was, how do we redesign clinical research studies that include US-based Black women that don't follow the paragonic model? And Ada Adamora has been, a leading force in that conversation about redesigning trials that use different set points or endpoints as a background measure of HIV incidence. So the comment and the question are sort of embroiled there, but I would love to hear both of your feedbacks.
So let me just add a couple things. While it's true that the efficacy trials on any of these PrEP agents have not generally been conducted in the US, that's largely because the incidence rates of HIV infection are very low compared to what they are in other parts of the world, and for women. And that makes it possible to get an answer more quickly in areas where you have higher incidence. That said, some of the earlier safety studies of many of these agents did include US women, and particularly around cabotegravir, some of the earlier studies did include women, including a study that was just for women called the Aegis study that was done in Los Angeles. So even though most of the excitement is about the final efficacy trial result, it's not true that no work has been done in advance with women. There have been acceptability studies, those kinds of things. And I think getting ready for the FDA, what we hope is approval of 083 and 084 cabotegravir for basically men and women. CDC has been working on incorporating cabotegravir into our guidelines for PrEP use, to include both men and women, and in doing an additional study of what factors people use to choose between different methods of PrEP, and including both daily oral PrEP and cabotegravir and a couple of others. And that study will include not just an adequate size of women to be able to understand what's going on with Black women, but it will also include Black men, which heterosexual or cisgender Black men who have sex with women, which hasn't been adequately looked at. And it will also include a sample of healthcare providers, because one of the things that we've learned with oral PrEP, as well as with cabotegravir when it's used for treatment, is that in addition to understanding what patients want, we have to understand what barriers providers feel to use the method or to prescribe the method. So I think even though all of the excitement is around the efficacy trial, there's quite a lot of work that's going on in terms of preparing for how to use this successfully in the US, in Black women as well as in other populations. Kim?
That Dawn really said much of the answer to the question, but I think to emphasize the point about you know, having data in U.S. women, again, that point around how you design these trials is frustrating, and you know, Ada Adamora is a friend and a hero of mine, and we have had this conversation, you know, over lots of glasses of wine and lots of dinners about how we can do this. Our challenge is we need to get to the efficacy piece, and in which case we need to go into the populations where the highest prevalence is in order to be able to answer the question, as Dawn rightly said, you know, as soon as we can, and then move on from there. It's different when we're talking about a Black MSM population, where in the United States we have numbers in the Black MSM population that where there's a incidence that is as high as almost any place in the world. And so we demanded and pushed to make sure that those studies actually had not just men who had sex with men, which is what was the case with most of the PrEP trials, but actually we demanded that of the men that were enrolled in the US, that 50% of those be Black MSM, so that we can answer that question for the Black community. And so I understand that frustration about that, the women's study not including US-based women, but the rationale, I think, it was the right thing in order to get us to the answer. And now we still have more work to do to get more experience in Black cisgender women with all sorts of PrEP, but in particular with cabotegravir. The one last point that I'll make is what we also did is made sure that in our treatment studies with cabotegravir, so we're also using cabotegravir for people who are infected with HIV as treatment, long-acting treatment dosed every month. We made sure that we had women in those studies, and we enrolled 30% women in those studies, which is very high for enrollment of women in HIV clinical trials. So we knew a lot about how women tolerated it, what the pharmacokinetics were in women, all of that before we even entered into those PrEP trials. But I take your point about that representation as soon as we possibly can, and that's where we're trying to go now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith and Dr. Smith. I'm never gonna get enough of that. I want to make sure, ladies, that you're still with me. Choose your emoji, whatever favorite one you have, and click that on so that I know that it's not a conversation of 2 or 3. Okay, I see 1. It's a conversation of 4. All right, y'all still with me. So we talked about the research. And we talked about Dr. Kim Smith. I mean, what could indeed be such an exciting time for us early next year. But what I'd like to talk about for a moment, if I don't see any hands raised, is even though oral PrEP might not have been the best option for all women, we do know that it was an option for some women. And some of those women might not have known, as we heard in an earlier session today, a woman who has chosen PrEP as a prevention strategy for herself, that she knew about PrEP. She just didn't know that it was for women. And so what might be some of your recommendations, and Dawn, your recommendations, as well as we're going to get another option for women, but we're going to have some of the same issues that we have right now. And so how do we advance that? And I'm asking, I'm being very sincere. I mean, we talk about this quite a bit, but I'm at the point now, it's what can we do differently to help advance some of the things that need to happen, so we don't keep just talking about the challenges. And we may walk away from this with one thing that we all can do. I just want to hear from the two of you what your vision or your thoughts are about maybe that one thing.
If we go back 10, 12 years ago, when the field of women's prevention was focused on microbicides, on the development of vaginal gels and creams and foams and things that would be used to prevent transmission. At that point, there was a network of women's microbicide advocates in multiple cities throughout the United States. And when you had a meeting about vaginal microbicides, you had a couple hundred women who would come to those meetings to talk about what they wanted, what they needed, to have community sessions to explain what a microbicide was, what the trials were, what they would look like if we were going to be using them. When there was some initial failures with the microbicides and the loss of some of the key leaders in that field who moved on to other things, those organizations went away. And so the problem we have now is that there is a vibrant network of organizations that are focused on gay men, that are promoting PrEP for gay men. And so the word is getting out through those organizations. That same infrastructure no longer exists for Black women. And we have to figure out how to get the community organizations that are concerned about Black women's health more engaged in this. So whether it's the organization that's focused on WIC for pregnant Black women, or whether it's the organization that's focused on breast cancer for Black women. There are a lot of health community-based organizations out there that are working around Black women's health issues, but they think of HIV as something separate over here. And we either have to develop a new network of Black women's HIV prevention organizations, or we have to work with the organizations that are already in the community and get them engaged. But I don't think that, speaking for CDC, I don't think that CDC is going to be able to fix that deficit of community awareness that PrEP is for women. We're too far away from the community to do that. And so that would be my one idea.
I think that's a fantastic one. And there's so the advocacy community, rising up to make that demand is always driven change in our field. And so I absolutely encourage that. But the one thing that I will say that maybe is that doesn't get talked about enough is that there needs to be a reset among providers, among the folks who are the docs that folks go to see for everything, their pap smears, not just STDs but when that you're going to as your primary care. There needs to be a change in mindset for these providers, that they stop with their stereotypes about who PrEP is for. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've heard from my friends who might ask their doctor about PrEP, and the response back from the doctor is, well, why do you want to know? Rather than to immediately be looking for ways to provide information and say, hey, here's how we're going to get PrEP for you. They're busy saying, well, what are you doing that you think you need PrEP? Well, I mean, the answer is I'm living my life. And if I'm coming to you and I'm asking about PrEP, I should be getting education, not getting judgment, not getting pushback. And so a reset that says that, you know, all women who are sexually active, you know, should be given that information and opportunity to know about PrEP and to be on PrEP if they decide that they want to. And so we've got to change that mind. It's got to be a reset. And so when, you know, as soon as a patient even asks about contraception, then the next thing should be, okay, you want to avoid pregnancy. Also, let's talk about how you can avoid HIV. So it has to be a complete change, and we really, you know, have to get at education of the providers. Yes, we need to educate the community, and yes, we need to create the demand from women. But you know, again, when you go see your doctor, you're looking to get advice, you're looking to get education, and if they don't have it from the beginning, then you're already behind the game.
Thank you, Dr. Kim Smith. Your comments, your exact comments came up in one of our earlier sessions today about sharing the responsibility and not putting all of the accountability for PrEP on Black women. That why do we have to be the one that has to know all the information and has to then educate the provider and then have to advocate for the provider to give it to us? Why does it have to be that way for us when it's not always that way for other communities? And so just thank you for that confirmation. Well, this went much faster than I thought. I just got so into this conversation because I could hear these two women speak all day long. But I want to do just a quick evaluation so that they know that you were with them and you got something from the conversation that we've been having. You got two options to respond to my little evaluation. I just need one word that just sums up for you what these past 53 minutes have been like for you. I'm hearing both Dr. Dawn Smith and Dr. Kim Smith speak. You can put it in the chat. You can come off of mute and let them know, but give us that one word. And for me, I see someone already put in educational. Danielle says, always fabulous, powerful, empowering, encouraging, informative, and honor. Y'all not gonna leave me a word. All those words come to mind from what I just experienced. Shiro. So, but I will say it's just been an absolute delight. I think that Dr. Kim Smith, you became the the bad lady, not the bad guy. You became the bad lady when you talked and honored Dr. Dawn Smith. But hearing her talk, I do hope that now some of my colleagues understand why I just feel the need to do so. Just such a brilliant and compassionate person about the work that we do. I have named her the mother of prep because I feel like anybody who has dedicated so much of their career and time to an issue deserves the honor that goes along with it. And I'm gonna stop because I'm not gonna cry. But I just thank you both, and it was an honor to spend this time with you. I won't forget the 56 minutes that we just shared with you, and what that's gonna mean to the folks who are here, who are gonna be going back to their states and their counties and cities, and able to take your words and your recommendations and turn them into something that's beautiful, and that helps us with forward movement for women who may be choosing PrEP as a prevention option for them.
So, Leisha,
Ma'am? Yes, ma'am.
we're partners in this. And the reason why I get upset when you start singling me out is that nothing is going to happen because of me. It's going to happen because of us. It's going to happen because people in the community are doing what they're doing. People in the health department are doing what they're doing. People in CDC and in ViiV and in all these other places are all playing their part. It is not about any one of us. It is about all of us together.
100%. And let's not let this be the last time we do this, because we have to keep doing it. I want you all to hold me accountable to everything that I've said about what we're going to do going forward. And let's come back not too distant future and talk about the progress that we made from here to there and what we need to do next. So let's keep this conversation going. Please carry it on wherever you go back to and spread it so that we'll make it a bigger and bigger discussion, and we keep coming back together. I really thank you, Leisha, for making this happen. I'm happy to be here and really proud to be among this wonderful group of leaders that is this is going to make a difference. This is, if it's going to be done for us, it's going to be done by us. So I thank you.
And Dr. Kim Smith, with that said, there really is nothing left to say. We thank you all for joining us. Some of you have been here all day, and we thank you. We thank you for joining this plenary. And as Dr. Kim Smith just said, this didn't fall on deaf ear. We'll take this back and help make PrEP access and information about PrEP awareness even bigger and better for our communities. We will have, I guess it's supposed to start in a minute. So those of you who are transitioning to a very special fashion show, a fashion show that was put on by women with HIV. And so all of the beautiful models are women with HIV. And so we could take a small break. I think it's actually on another link that we will join momentarily, and we will continue to honor some amazing women as our finale with the social hour and the fashion show. All right, thank you guys so much.